something happen.
Ace, queen, 3 with a couple of hearts.
And a nice flop for Minkin's range versus that big blind defense.
Bet 95.
Let's throw out a c-bet. See if Jacqueline wants to mess around or just take the conventional route and fold. Might have some messing around, Ellie.
Raise 265.
Messing around
Well done.
indeed.
Took that 7 of hearts and took it kind of to glory.
Well, the 10 of spades weighing into the choice as well, perhaps, blocking some of the straight draws.
It's relevant, yeah. This is more just a pure bluff, kind of based on the situation. With
He's
maybe
asking.
a bit of sense beyond just a spot. It's a little confusing for Minkin. Oh my
goodness!
Minkin getting
So
gangster.
Jacqueline asking the question,
Yeah,
and
show it,
Minkin
Kelly.
shouting her reply from the rooftops.
Imagine the following situation. You're in a WSOP main event and you're left with a short stack of 15 big blinds and you wonder what your best strategy would look like in that situation. My name is Andreas and welcome to my poker channel. On this channel I'm going to present you with poker strategy and poker news, and in this video specifically I'm going to dive into short stack poker in a tournament like the WSOP main event and show you exactly the tips and tricks how to survive as a short stack. Let's have a look what happened here. Minkin as a pre-flop raiser sees the flop of ace queen 3 with 2 hearts and figures that, okay, if her opponent had an ace here, he would have re-raised all in pre-flop given that they were only 15 big blinds deep. So she puts out a continuation bet of 95,000 into 380,000, which is about, or exactly, a quarter of the pot. Jacqueline, seeing this small continuation bet, very quickly check raises it here to 260,000, figuring that Minkin would go ahead and c-bet her entire range, but he does it with a completely random hand. Now back to Minkin, she probably figures out that he's not going to have that many check raises here in this situation and thinks that he's full of shit, goes ahead and piles in her last 800,000 and gets him obviously to fold his bluff. Before I head into the technical analysis of this hand, I have to say that I like her play. Given that Jacqueline has a very weak range, he has to at least think about what he's check raising here on the flop. There are not that many hands that he can use. He can use a second pair, given that he's probably not having any top pairs anymore, like queen jack, queen 10, or something like queen 3 suited, which is already a 2-pair, which has a lot of incentives to get in the money right now against, for example, a hand like an ace. On the other hand, if she were playing against a player with a near optimal strategy, she would have burned a bunch of money in this situation so deep in the main event. I'm going to show you guys later with PO Solver how that would look like. Let's get into the technical part of this hand. I want to ask you, what is your strategy in Minkin's shoes when you're on the button with your entire range? What do you do with 15 big blinds in a tournament, like the main event? Or it doesn't even matter which tournament it is. Write it down in the comment section below what you do. Do you just go all in with all your hands? Do you min raise your entire range? Or do you min raise some hands and go all in with some other hands? I'm curious what you are doing right now before you watch until the end of this video, where you might pick up some new strategies that you haven't employed yet. When you're on the button with 15 big blinds, a lot of the hands that you have should go directly all in, and here's why. When you're on the button, for instance with a hand like a6 offsuit, you benefit a lot from going all in before the flop, because let's imagine your opponent has a suited 10, a suited 9, whatever. He cannot call your all-in that easily, even though he has a lot of equity against your hand, because you're going to have a lot of decent hands as well, a bit better hands, of course, than your a6 also that you're shoving with, so you cannot have the equity to call you. However, if you min raise the button, or maybe 2.5x, your opponent, when he has a hand like 10-7 suited, he can just call his big blind, getting an insanely good price and then see a flop with you. And it's not that difficult for him to occasionally flop a pair of 10s, a pair of 7s against your a6 offsuit. And then, you know, you're probably not going to win the hand anymore with your a6 offsuit. This range that I'm using here for the button is from raiseyyouredge.com. And the main gist of it is that you're raising all the good hands in the top left corner, 8s or better, ace-10 offsuit or better, or ace-8 suited or better, and mixing a few bluffs, for example, also offsuit combinations like king-9 off, queen-9 off, 10-9 off, and some suited combinations, and that have great playability after the flop when there's not that much money behind. I cannot say for sure what Minkin's strategy was in that moment, but I could assume that a lot of players in the live felt playing like this. They are going all in with a lot of the weak a6 combinations and the weak pocket pairs because it's just so easy to win and it's just the best way to play the hand. However, I think a lot of the players are just min raising a lot of suited hands like Jack 8 suited, Queen 9 suited, King 8 suited, and try to play post-flop still with 15 big blinds. I don't know if that was happening, but this is the range that I assigned to Minkin in this spot. Now for the out-of-position player, Andres Jacqueline, I assigned this range that you can see here. I would assume that with 5 million chips he was re-raising all in, or just re-raising and not just calling with everything that's better than King 10 off. So maybe he could still have that hand in his range, any ace and any pocket pair. Let me just quickly explain to you guys what this program does. This is PO Solver. You can basically put in the ranges and then the board and the stack sizes and the bet sizes all on the left here. And then this will compute a strategy for you that's in this case 1% accurate what you should be doing optimally. Let's have a look step by step at what both players would be doing optimally in this situation. The first thing you want to do when working with PO Solver is you look at the equities in play to understand what's happening in this situation. Now, the out of position player having a capped range, not having any pocket pairs or ace-x combination in this situation, and also not very strong flush draws and gut shots, has 30% equity with his entire range here. The in-position player, however, with a very strong range, has 70% range. You're smashing this board way more often and way more heavy with a lot of good sets and top pairs. The second step you want to take when working with PO Solver is looking at the EVs in place, the so-called expected value. When you have 30% of equity as the out of position player, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna get 30% of the pot, which is 38 or 380,000 here. If you got 30% of the pot, that would mean you would win 12. However, you can see that PO Solver tells you that you only get 6 out of 38, roughly 15% of the pot only if both players play an optimal strategy. So you significantly under-realize as the out-of-position player because the in-position player can basically bet on the flop, turn and river and leverage his strong hands against you. You sometimes are going to end up folding the best hand or fold a lot of equity on the flop when your opponent even bets a small sizing because you cannot call down on the river. You just have to fold a lot of your winning hands against your opponent's continuation bets. The in-position player here, by the way, has obviously the equivalent. He has 38 of EV, and you can see that each individual hand has a number. That means if you both players play optimally, this is the EV that you get on average. For example, pocket aces as the in-position player gets about 1.5 times the pot. And then maybe something funny for you to see, the out-of-position player has even a higher EV hand. If the out-of-position player has Queen 3 suited exactly here, he would actually net 57, so 1.5 times the pot, because he would just get paid off by ace-x a lot of his opponent, and therefore net. This is the highest profitable hand in the situation for both players is Queen 3 suited. The third step at interpreting this post-flop simulation here is that you have a look at the notes. You can see that if we check as out of position player, the preferred bet size is a quarter pot over an all-in shove, unsurprisingly, as the in-position player. You can see that we would almost be never checking. As you can see, it's going to be a balance, and the hand that gets checked the majority of the time, or the most frequent, not the majority, is going to be pocket jacks. Now, after we bet 10, our opponent as the out-of-position player will go ahead and check, raise some combination. Let's have a look at some of the all-in hands. First, these would be typically hands like 5-3 of hearts, 5-deuce of hearts, because those hands, they just benefit by going all in directly so that our opponent cannot just call the flop and see if a heart rolls off on the turn. However, some of our stronger made hands, they would prefer to check raise a smaller sizing to 30 here. This is roughly what the check raise sizing was here in the hand example. For example, Queen 3 suited, the highest EV hand for the out of position player, would do that. And then also some of the stronger second pairs. We don't have any top pairs, or we cannot just let our opponents get away with some of his gut shots and backdoor equity hands like 7-8 of spades, if that's in our opponent's range. So we want to check raise here sometimes to deny some equity. And if we do so and our opponent goes all in, then we would call off all those hands that we check raise with, except for a few of them. And we can now deduce which ones are the bluffs. And you can see that I also mentioned earlier that, you know, the king of hearts would be our prime bluff. Why? If you check raise with the king of hearts and your opponent just calls, which would also happen some of the time, you can then go all in on a hard turn and then basically continue semi-bluffing. So the king of hearts will be your prime bluff, and then once you get jammed on, you would let it go. So you can already see that having a king 8 offsuit is probably not the best 3-bet jam here from a technical perspective, not only because it would be called all the time and only be racing against or slightly behind against those flusher types of holding, but also you almost don't get any folds and you're actually blocking the folds. If Minkin had the king of hearts here against an optimal player, that would be quite a suicidal play because you would get called by your opponent's entire range, leaving your opponent with no bluffs whatsoever. If the out of position player is gonna check raise with a narrow range of second pairs and some flush draws, we would obviously fold some hands as the in position player. These are unsurprisingly the king highs and the jack high combinations here, and also some of the king size that we raised with, and then call with the middling hands such as pocket jacks and pocket tens, which we might fold on the turn against some jams on some different turn cards. But we would then also call with some traps like aces and ace queen, and then sometimes also shove those hands and do a little bit of both so that our opponent doesn't get away with check raising as a semi bluff nearly as often. Last but not least, we're going to have a look at what the out of position player should have done if your opponent has such a significant equity edge over you because of the pre-flop ranges in play. You just have to let go of very many hands, even though your opponent is going to bet only a quarter of the pot. You're overfolding a lot, basically folding at 59% against such a small sizing, and you can see all the hands that would be electing to fold. And you can already tell that, yeah, some of the hands that want to call with are going to be some king highs, and then obviously some middle pairs that are a bit weaker, some bottom pairs, and then the raising hands we already had a look at. So you really want to make sure that you stick to those strategies, because otherwise you're going to get punished by someone jamming her entire range on you someday. Let's have a look at what we learned today. When you're playing as a short stack, then with 15 big blinds, you can shove more profitability with a lot of your holdings that don't want to see a flop. And like a6 offsuit, king 9 suited definitely wants to go all in with that stack size, because you're gonna get sometimes even better hands to folds. For example, if your opponent is ace offsuit and you have king 9 suited, you're gonna get him to fold. But if you min raise, he might be re-raising all in versus you and then win the hand. Also, when you have a weak range on an ace high flop, for example in this instance, in this hand that you can see from the beginning, then it's okay to fold a lot. You can fold up to 60% of your range when your opponent even bets a quarter of the pot. And on the other hand, it's also okay to bet a quarter of the pot when your pre-flop range is very strong and you can get away with betting your entire range in this situation. I want to thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you did like the analysis of short stack poker in tournaments. And if you did find some value and learn anything, I would much appreciate if you could hit the like button down here and subscribe to the channel to come back for more content on Andreas Fröhlich Poker. Best of luck at the tables and see you guys for the next one.